Welcome, friends, to this episode of the Everyday Educator podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Bailey, and I'm excited to spend some time with you today as we learn together, encourage one another, and ponder the delights and challenges that make homeschooling the adventure of a lifetime. Now, whether you're just considering this homeschooling possibility or deep into the daily delight of family learning, I believe you'll enjoy thinking along with us. But don't forget, although our online community is awesome, you'll find even closer support in a local CC community. So go to classicalconversations.com and find a community near you today. Well, ladies, I am excited to have you join me today as we talk to our lovely listeners about active reading. I've got Delise and Kelly both with me. Kelly Wilt, thank you for joining me and Delise today on the podcast.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And talking about reading is one of my favorite things.
I know. And I'm going to explore that with you in just a second. I want people to know what you've been working on. Delise, I know that you are a bookworm like me, so I think this will be fun for you too.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be a blast.
We're coming into the summer months, okay? And one of the things that I remember the most about summertime was that I had more time to read. I was a bookworm as a child, but one of the things I remember about reading in the summertime is that almost everywhere had a summer book club or a summer reading program. I can remember our local library did. Our church library did. I'm telling my age, I came from the era that Pizza Hut had a summer reading program and you could earn a personal pan pizza for reading books, which was for me a slam dunk because I was going to read even if somebody didn't give me a pizza. But I wondered about you guys. Did you love or did you do a summer reading program when you were a kid? And what was your favorite part of summer reading programs? Kelly, let me ask you first.
Oh my. Well, you know that I did because any opportunity to capitalize on what I was already going to be doing was fabulous. And I too am of the era of Pizza Hut Book It.
Yes.
We feasted like kings and queens on this little
Yes,
pizza.
I know.
And so summer reading club was always a part of my relaxing activities once the academic year concluded, because it was time for me to finally get my hands on the big stack of books that I had been accumulating throughout the school year and hadn't quite gotten to yet. So, oh yes. Delise, what about you?
Well, this is so funny to me because I'm like, okay, well, when did they stop it? Because I could be Lisa's daughter, and my favorite thing was the pan pizza.
Yes.
So, yes, I absolutely loved it. We would do it at the library. And you know what? When you mentioned church, I forgot about that. But there was a Quaker church down the street from where we lived that we loved, and we were very involved in that church as well as our home church. And I think we got Krispy Kreme donuts from that one. So, because we lived in, the land of Krispy Kreme when I was a kid. And so those two things, like literally making reading sweet, were really important. And I always loved books, but I was never a fast reader as a child.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I struggled with it, but I wanted the content. And so the summer was this just incredible opportunity for me to take my interests and to not have the pressure to read quickly, because of course during the school year you've got to finish the book, write the paper. Just there are more goals attached to the reading. But this time it was just read the books, get your pizza, make sure your brothers don't make fun of you at the end of the year.
Yes. I love that. I love that you said like summer reading clubs are not just for fast readers. Because I know, like I was a super competitive firstborn readaholic child. And so for me, part of it, my personal thing was, can I read more books this year than I read last year? But I love, and we're going to come back to it, not every child is a read a book as fast as you can. And not every child is super competitive, and not every child can read that fast and enjoy it. So we can come back to that. What do you do with kids who would not naturally choose reading as the fun thing to do this summer? We'll talk about that. Um, Kelly, do you remember a book that you fell in love with as a kid?
Oh my goodness. During the summer, it wasn't just one book, it was a series. So
Okay.
during the summertime, like Delise was saying, I felt like I had the flexibility to just luxuriate in words that I was reading. And so probably I think it was the summer that I was 9 or 10. I discovered the Little House on the Prairie series. And I spent a summer alongside Laura Ingalls Wilder, thinking about all things Pioneer. I think I slept under my bed a couple of times that summer, pretending
Oh
that
my
I was
gosh. Yes.
covered wagon. My mom probably walked in and wondered what on earth. But I just it was a time for me to just dwell in that land, that fictional land of that book, and just
Yeah.
to enjoy making it my own. And shortly
Yeah.
after that, another summer, I discovered the Anne of Green Gables series, and I'm
Yes.
going to say I plowed through it because it sounds horrible, but I was voracious. Like I
Yeah.
just wanted to
Yeah.
see what came
What
next to
next?
that character.
Yeah.
And I think I did the same thing with the Chronicles of Narnia. Just summer was the time for series. And
Yes.
almost this bittersweet goodbye at the end of the summer when I would
Mhm.
reach the end of the author's words in a
Yeah.
particular series because I wasn't quite ready to let go of those
Right.
characters I had come to love. But summer for me was always the time of a series and not just a
That's
standalone book.
good. That's really good, and that's a great encouragement, parents, if you're looking for something with some longevity. I know that there were books that my kids loved, and they wanted the next one, and some books don't have sequels, and so that was a hard conversation, It's like, "I'm sorry, there's not another one," and so sometimes they would, and I will admit this, I'm not gonna tell the author in case they come after me, but, like, I took some picture books and just took the character and made up my own stories because my kids were so affronted that there was not another one. But the series thing is great, and you're right. You have the time to do that. Delise, what book did you fall in love with as a kid?
Yeah, I will say, to piggyback, the series thing is great. And I know sometimes parents say that they have challenges with their boys wanting to read. And my
Yes.
brothers were obsessed with Redwall. So if you're looking for a
Oh, yes. My
male
sons-in-law
centric,
also.
yeah, heroes
Yeah.
series, and there are so
Yeah.
many of them. We have them because my brother now lives in Japan from my brother's
Oh,
childhood. So that's a really good recommendation. But to answer your
yes.
question, um, two come to mind. One is a mini series, and I actually, for the first time, read it to Leo last night. And it's
Oh,
all about
awesome.
double entendres, and those were just Amelia Bedelia. When I was little,
Yes.
I just
Yes.
thought she was the most hilarious thing, and it was very fun helping my 3-year-old to navigate the wordplay
Yes.
because he's like right on the
Yeah.
edge. Some of them were very funny to them. Some of them were
Right.
terms we don't use anymore, like to draw the drapes. And so that was
Yes,
fun for
yes.
me to describe to him why it was funny.
Why it's funny.
Exactly. So I definitely liked little books like that when I was very small. And then reaching to high school, I remember falling in love. I think this was the first large book I read on my own volition. I fell in love with Gone with the Wind. And I had my
Oh,
mother's
yeah.
copy, and I just remember looking at the book and thinking it was beautiful and knowing I love old films. So I knew the
Right.
story. I'd seen
Uh-huh.
that film, that original one that won all the Oscars, a million
Yes.
times. But I thought, why is it so long? It's over 1,000 pages.
It
Why
uh,
is it so
ha
long? There must be
the
something missing from the
screenplay could
story.
not be that long.
Exactly. And so I read it, and I read that book very quickly. And I just fell in love with period pieces after that. It really
Yeah.
sparked a
Yeah.
curiosity for me for history. So then I
Mhm.
wanted more things like Jane Austen or just things that would bring me back in time. So those
Yep.
are two books I really loved.
Yep. That's really cool. I was thinking, "Ooh, what would I say if I was gonna answer this question?" And you guys have taken a lot of my answers because I loved those same kinds of books. But I remember our church had a summer reading club, and it must have been the year I was in the third or fourth grade. It was right along in there. And the summer reading club that year was arranged around the presidents. So, like, you read a book, like for every three books, you got to put a sticker of a president up. And so um, I decided I would read some biographies of some presidents. We didn't have a biography of every president in our church library, but I did some. And then I got hooked on biographies. So that whole summer I read about Florence Nightingale and Clara Barton. I read so many, Mary Todd Lincoln. I read all kinds of biographies. And that was the kind of book I had never read before, really. And so, parents, if you have a student who really doesn't like make believe, now, like, that's kind of hard for me. Like, I love make believe and my kids like to make believe, but some kids don't like to read make believe. They like to read about real things. Try a biography. They might actually love it. Um, but I do wonder, what are your guys? You said you were introducing Leo to Amelia Bedelia, which I think is awesome. What is Leo's favorite kind of thing to read with you? And what does he
Oh.
like best about reading with you?
Right now, we like musical books, and I think that comes from
Oh,
my background. I have
yes, you
musical
love
family, but
music.
yes, I love music, and I was also a music and movement teacher for
Mhm.
that sweet spot, that age range where he is right now. So I have a lot of musical books that I can read, a lot of
Okay, so
folk tales and things like
talk
that.
about that. What are musical books?
Yeah, so a lot of folk tales from around the world. I'm trying to think of an American one. I apologize. I'll keep
Oh,
thinking on
that's
that.
okay.
Ones from Africa and Asia
Uh-huh.
tend to have a song that goes with it, culturally speaking. And so,
Oh.
like, for example, we love The Laughing River is one that we read, and it has a number of different greetings. I think there are 4 songs in that book. And
And
so
so is the song part of the book, and
it's
how do you
part of
know
the
how to
story.
sing it? And
And in a lot of the books that I have from the 90s, they have it written in the book. Like, if you
yeah,
don't know how the song goes, you can just flip to
right.
the back page and read the music and you will know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for the ones that I have, for example, Winnie the Pooh has a lot of little songs in it.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how they go, so I just make up
You
the
just
melody.
make it up. Yes, we do
We
that.
know how it goes, you know?
Right,
We have
exactly.
Daddy
Exactly.
because he knows how it
That's
goes.
right.
And if there's a story that we like and it has a really good rhythm, and I
Yes.
appreciate the rhythm. I was a songwriting major in college, so I will often make it a song, even if it's not a
Yes.
song,
Yes.
just because I find little children gravitate toward music. It does
I
something
love
with
it.
their brain, and it really helps them to feel that they can identify and remember this.
Right.
So,
The problem comes, though, when you make it up that other people don't know it. And my kids would say a lot of time, "That's not how it goes,"
oh yeah,
Or Gideon, my grandson, my daughter, I would make a little song while I'm telling the story, and he would go home, and my daughter would read him the book, and she would try to sing it, and he would just look at her and go, "No, no, no." It is fun to make up songs. You're right. I love it. That's great. I should have guessed that you would do that with your background. Kelly, what did your kids like to read with you? And what did they love the most about reading time that you did with
Mm.
them?
I think just being close, holding them close, having
Okay.
just a time where we just shut everything else in the world off for a few moments, and just were together in that world of imagination made it special. My kids also love for me to sing and to use different voices and narrate
Yes.
different types of people. Um, I still remember we read Bread and Jam for Francis
Oh,
by
yes.
Ian Hoban. And
Absolutely.
there are these little tunes that Frances
Oh,
sings as she
yes.
describes how much she loves jam on toast and how she hates soft
I
eggs and all
don't
these things.
like jam.
That's right. And I had a tune that I sang for that. We also read tons, when they were small, tons of Sandra Boynton books,
Oh,
which are
yeah.
hilarious little books. And there was one called Snuggle Puppy. And I come up with a tune for the Snuggle Puppy song. And even just recently, I was just standing in the kitchen cooking and I started singing a Snuggle Puppy song. And my 19-year-old turns around and like he looked like he had like a tear in the corner of his eye.
Oh,
I haven't heard the Snuggle Puppy song in years.
yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like, he gave me a hug and he's like, oh, thanks for reminding me of that. And it was just so precious.
That's so sweet.
I think that now that they're older, though, like, when they were young, we would have this shared experience. But now that they're
Yeah.
older, a lot of times we'll read books separately and then come together and have conversations. And I think that's especially sweet for my 16-year-old daughter. That just, I'll just make some coffee and we'll sit down and we'll talk about Pride and Prejudice, or we'll talk about the Screw Tape Letters, or whichever book. She's a huge mystery reader and she
Oh,
loves
yes.
mystery books kind of like her mom did at that age. I remember one summer was the summer of Agatha Christie. And
Oh,
so
yeah. Oh,
that was
yeah.
probably one summer. That was probably four, 4 or 5
Yeah.
summers. But
Yeah.
we'll get together and we'll talk. And, that closeness has evolved as my children have gotten older. And it still is a precious time for us to be able to share together. So
Yeah.
it
That's
doesn't
beautiful.
stop. It just changes as they get
You're
older.
right. You're right. You're right. And that closeness stays apart. And it is what draws lots of families to reading. But I also know that there are lots of families whose kids are not naturally drawn to reading, or who fine, I'll sit down and read for 30 minutes a day, but mostly I want to do stuff in the summer. So I titled this podcast Active Reading, because I know some people only think that reading is the quiet time, or what you do in the half hour between eating lunch and going back to the swimming pool or whatever. But reading can be so much more than that. And I really want us to help families think of ways to make reading fun for all of our kids, even our active kids, this summer. So let's brainstorm for a minute. What is one way that reading could be active and not a passive activity? So, Delise, what do you think? I know you've got little Leo who is only 3. And so um, passive is probably not in his vocabulary, at least not for very long at a time. How do you make reading active for somebody little like Leo?
Yeah, if we're talking about someone small, and I remember my mother did this so well just throughout our years. But
Mm-hmm.
if I was just thinking of a person, say under the age of 6,
Yeah.
anything that can make it physical is key. So, if you need physical and quiet, I used to keep scarves while we were reading a book,
Yes.
and you can act out the story with your scarf. If the
I
character is
love
moving
it.
slowly or making something, a scarf can do so many different things.
Yes, they
So
can.
that's an easy way for them to have their hands busy but productive and really internalizing. And you can tell, even with a very small child, if they are
Yes.
actually understanding what you're reading by what their hands do,
Mm-hmm.
because some children, it takes them longer to articulate their understanding, but they can express it. So
Yes.
that
Beautifully
has
said.
been fun. And of course, if you don't have a scarf, you could use a little toy or figurine and say, let's pretend
Yeah.
this character, and you be this character and I'll be this other character. And every time we read a page,
Right.
and even just asking really good questions. The older they get, sometimes you're working on emotional literacy and it's social
Yes.
emotional intelligence.
Good.
So you're looking at the book, and before I read the page that tells you how the character feels, I'll say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think this person is feeling right now? And why do you think that? And then maybe,
Yep.
have you ever felt that way? And let's find out.
Yes.
Or ask them to
Yes.
guess, instead of just reading them the whole story, say, okay, what do you think is going to happen next? Why do you think that's going to happen next? Okay, let's see. And then you turn the page. So it kind of gives them a chance to interact with the book, and they can get up and do that, or they can just talk to you about it. I have a very talkative one. He's fine with just telling me a little story. Um, so there's that, but then, I mean, depending on what you're reading, there are activities that are built in to the story,
Oh,
like
yeah.
what we mentioned earlier, the how to bake an apple pie and see the world. I mean, literally, it's right there on the top. Go ahead and bake your apple pie.
Yep. 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 there are lots of things that you can do. Kelly, what are some things that you did? I know you've got two boys and a girl, so I suspect that some of the times that you wanted to do reading with your boys, especially like Delise said, when they were little, they wanted to be moving or active. What are some things you did to keep reading active?
Oh my goodness. Yes, we had some eras where we had to be very active in order to keep engaging all three of them at once. I remember
Yeah.
there were several summers where I would just choose a book and we would make a certain time of day reading time. And we would make it special because I would take all four of our chairs at our table and I would lay like this huge rainbow knit afghan over the chairs and we would make a reading
Okay. Oh, a
and
tent.
we would all lay under our fort. That would work better for my boys. My daughter liked they liked fort, and we would all lay on our bellies with a book, and I would read to them. And there was something magical about that for them. And I remember one summer I undertook the idea of reading Alice in Wonderland to them out loud, which
Oh my gosh.
you know. We had some parts that like Delise was describing Amelia Bedelia where they loved all of the language but they didn't always connect what was going on and so I would have to stop and explain but when we got to the end of the book I told them I said guys we're going to celebrate we read this book together and we had our own tea party
Tea party. Yeah,
we
perfect.
we played card games and we decorated the table with cards and we pulled like
That's so
paper
great.
plates out of the pantry and we made them into hats and we all sat down and I think I just had cookies and we drank lemonade or
Uh-huh.
something like that
Uh-huh.
but to them it was the Mad Hatter's tea party and it made it special because we were doing it
Right.
together and I have pictures of them when they were little we would do that with different books throughout the year and in the summer I have pictures of all three of them sitting on our couch eating their bread and jam because we did that for bread and jam for Francis
Yes.
and
Yes.
different books it gave them different experiences because reading when reading becomes a part of who you are reading leads to doing like you want
Yes.
to take ownership over
Yes.
whatever's happening in that book so I remember the summer of Little House on the Prairie like I really wanted to learn how to knit I mean desperately
Oh, yes.
and so there were things that I saw Ma doing in the book or, Pa doing. Now, I didn't want to take an
Mhm.
axe and go out and chop down trees and build a cabin.
Yeah, maybe
But
not.
there were
Maybe not
things,
shoot a panther, but okay. Yeah.
that's right. But there were certain things that I looked at and went, well, that sounds like fun. I want to learn how to make flapjacks and, I want to learn
Right.
these things. And so
Right.
I think that's a huge part of making summer reading active reading because as you're reading, you should be thinking about the things that are happening in that book. And, obviously there are some books where this doesn't hold true, but in a lot of them, there are things that you can encourage your child to learn more about or that you
Right.
can participate in that make the book even more real. Because, like Delise said, you are cultivating emotional educational literacy as they're taking in those words and they're thinking about what they mean and about the plot and the setting and the character.
Mhm.
So it really
Mhm.
is a rich time where during the academic year, you might just not have as much time because you do have, you know, um, I guess, windows of time where certain things need to be accomplished. And in the summer,
Right.
we might have a little bit more luxury to be
More
able to
freedom.
spend more time. Yeah, to spend more time enjoying those types of activities as we read. And I think my children, it was always a wonderful time whenever I would say, all right, we're going to go and do this thing because they knew that the reading
Yeah.
would lead to doing. And so for
Yes.
active little boys and an active little girl, that was like magical for me to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Now, I suspect, guys, that there are some moms out here who are thinking, but nobody in my family ever really read to me. And, they may be thinking, my family read to me, but now I don't remember the names of the books. How am I supposed to go find a book that would lead to an activity? I mean, people are probably furiously writing down Little House on the Prairie and, all these things that y'all have brought up. But where, if you are a young mom or if you're a grandma listening to this and you think, I don't have those books anymore, I don't know what to look for. Um, I want to I want to mention one resource that I used as a young mom, and in talking to Delise, I know that she has plans to use this too. It's a book. It's a series called Five in a Row. It's a curriculum that will advocate you reading the same book, and lots of times it's a picture book. So even your youngest listeners are going to be drawn to it. They advocate that you read this book every day for 5 or 6 days, and then they give you tons of activities that would make reading this book active. I can remember reading the story of Ping with my little girls. I remembered it from when I was little, but I was so excited to read it to them because then we did geography. Like we found where China was and we made a pin and we put it in China and we looked and we put a piece of yarn between China and where we lived in the United States. And so we talked about distance and we talked about the kinds of boats they have in China, the wise-eyed boat, which was his home on the Yangtze River that Ping followed every day. We did science things. We talked about buoyancy, like Ping floats. What else will float? We did all kinds of things, and I didn't have to think of all of the good activities myself because, like, my brain was spent just trying to keep these little humans alive and the house running and stuff. And so that is one resource. If you're thinking, yeah, I love this book, but I don't know what I would do with it. I mean, get some help at first because once you kind of get your juices going, once you see what somebody else has thought about doing with the book, you'll start thinking that way too. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Delise, what do you think? What are some environments so we could all read wherever we wanted to? And like Kelly read, in a fort. We read a lot of times outside under a tree. What are some environments that lead themselves to active reading?
Well, I loved when you mentioned, Kelly, that you guys had the same place, that you return to the same
Mm,
place every time. Because again, you guys will just have to forgive me. If you don't care about how the brain works, that's okay. Just
that's
nod and smile.
I
But
care.
I
I
care,
care.
and I think it's fascinating the way that God's made us. And in the same way that people like to have their Bible study chair and they just feel like they
Yep.
meet the Lord better in a specific spot, that's not on accident. Your brain actually does
Yeah.
key in. If it doesn't have to be elaborate, is what I'm saying. It does need to be repeated, especially if you have a child
Mm,
who isn't as interested in the book. You can help them to learn to explore and learn to love learning by just putting them in the same place when you
yeah,
do
that's
it. So
good.
I'll give you some ideas, but yeah, the repeating the spot is I think that little sweet secret that a lot of people sometimes
Oh,
stumble
yeah.
into. But if you want to dive into it head first, you'll find that it's very rewarding. Um, I love outside. I know
Yes.
that's controversial for some people, but there is something really beautiful and calming about reading outside. And there's
Mhm.
no reason in the summer, usually, that you can't just take that same thing you were doing inside when the weather wasn't as nice outside. So I
Yeah.
would highly recommend that one, especially again, if you were like me as a child, reading made you very drowsy. So being outside and helping that
Yeah.
child to maybe wake up and get a little more sunlight could help them
Yep.
read longer. And
It's
so
good.
anywhere, hammock, you can put them on the top of
Mhm.
the playground if you want, and just tell them you can come down when you're done.
Yeah.
A couch, somewhere that you can make noise, especially for younger children.
Yes.
But honestly, for me, I
That's
find
good.
myself laughing out loud in public
Oh
places
my gosh, yeah.
because I'm reading a book that is hilarious. So
Yep.
being
Yep,
able
yep,
to
yep.
ask questions of the book, and ask questions of the people around you is really helpful. And just going back to what I was saying, with the books I'm reading with Leo, sometimes we'll have a shaker or we'll have rhythm sticks. And so
Yes.
the person is walking, we're padding out that. So a place that has space to move so that you don't feel like you have to be still while you're internalizing the information is a really good spot to read.
Mhm. Mhm. That's good. I like that. You want your children to be free to move around. And, I think a lot of us, when we thought about read aloud time with our kids, we imagined a sweet little child snuggled up in our lap, just happy to listen to all the things we say. But then you get the child that has a question about every fourth word. And what does that mean? And what is that? And why did they do that? And what are they going to do next? And you're just like, okay, if you'll just let me get through the story, we'll all know the answers. But that's active reading. That is your child entering into the world of that character and asking questions. So just like let your plans go, let your let your thoughts loose, and then just explore the beauty that reading with your real child can be. With them asking you questions, maybe you will even stop and ask them some questions. Well, what would you do? Or like Delise said, what do you think the sound he would make when he walks? Well, what would the bear make when he walks? Or what about the lizard? And so you explore all kinds, you teach them how to imagine. And that's really, really good. Okay. It is the cliche that summer reading is good for you, right? And so we have to say that we agree with that. But I suspect that all of us really do. But why? Why is reading in the summer an important activity? Kelly, why do you think? Why is summer reading important?
Well, I know a lot of people refer to summer and the lack of activity in the summer as being the summer slide, where you
Ooh,
just
okay.
you kind of lose all of a little bit of the sharpening of the skills that we
Oh,
practice in the
so
academic
like
year.
you lose your academic edge. It's like the
Right.
slide into
Yes.
losing your skills. Okay,
Yes.
gotcha.
And so, one of the reasons why, I know that reading during the summer months is good is that it helps keep your child's brain active. You
Yeah,
keep pursuing knowledge, you keep building on your experiences during the homeschool year. And so, there's not as much recouping when those things start to, begin again in the fall and when
right.
the
Sure,
community begins to come together and maybe you're memorizing,
sure.
memory work again. You're still helping your child to just keep momentum, mental
Okay.
momentum, during the summer months. I think also one of the reasons why summer reading is good for you is that, you're continuing to build a family culture of learning, even during
Mm-hmm.
those months. So I think sometimes, those of us who maybe weren't home educated, we fall into this, okay, these are the academic months of the year. And then the summer,
Right.
you
These
just
are
take
the resting months or the
that's right.
playing months or
That's
the
right.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
really, as homeschoolers, life is learning and learning is life. And
Mhm.
so maybe summer reading, might look a little different, but it's still good for your brain. It's good for your family to
That's
engage
good.
together.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, Lisa, about what you said earlier in the podcast about how some students, they want to engage in the practical and
Right.
a learning
Right.
environment that maybe we didn't mention, because Delise mentioned a bunch of wonderful learning environments. The
Yeah.
kitchen is also a great
That's
reading
true.
environment. So I'm thinking about, like, in the summer, that's the time when sometimes I'll pull out recipes and I'll have my daughter read them to me. And so we're practicing sequencing skills and real life application. But that reading during the summer is also a time to maybe do some lower stakes reading that will continue to reinforce those skills that you've sharpened during your academic homeschool year. So, yeah, lots of good things. Delise, what about you? I know there are some things that you can add too. Why is reading good for you in the summer?
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm so glad that you brought up just those practical aspects. I mean, reading is very
Yeah.
practical. It's
Mhm.
practical to
It
imagine.
is.
It's good for the brain. You really hope that your scientist has an imagination, that the doctor
Yes.
who's helping
Yes.
you can picture what's happening beyond the skin,
Yeah.
etc. But I, if I had to just say, why is it good for you? I would say it helps you to stay inspired and curious. I thought
Yeah.
about that phrase people say, how the idle hands are the devil's playground. But I would
Mhm.
even take it so far as to say idle mind is just as bad. And
Sure.
so, when Paul is talking to the church in Philippi and he's telling them to think on good things and he gives this list, he kind of gives that list, whatever's good, whatever's true, whatever's lovely, you all
Right.
know this, with the understanding that they would have a point of reference. And I think
Right.
that's something that sometimes we take for granted with our children, that they have that point of reference. You have to have,
Mhm.
as my mom would say, good schema. You've got to have
Mm.
something
Yeah.
in there to refer to in order
Yep.
to meditate on good things and then act on good
Mhm.
things, to cultivate a beautiful life, to have good culture. And so I just think it's the best way to feed a healthy curiosity. And I was that kid. It's funny, it didn't occur to me. Sometimes people do change, but I think God makes you a
Yeah.
specific way in a lot of
Yeah.
aspects. And I've always loved nonfiction. I've always been very curious about the tactile arts. And
Yep.
so when I was a child and you sent me into the library for my summer reading program, I headed to the adult nonfiction. And I
There you
wanted to
go.
read books about either
How to do
biology,
something.
into
Mhm.
my fish tank. I wanted to learn about decorating. I mean, I wanted to learn how to cook. I wanted to learn about
Right.
fashion. And my mom let me pick out, the Bobbi Brown
Sure.
book. And I wasn't allowed to wear makeup, but I sure could contour your face and tell you
That's
all about,
right.
all kinds of stuff like that. But it made me, it changed the way that I looked at the world. But you're right, it was lower stakes reading. And
Yes.
so I didn't have to plow through it, but I was able to internalize it. And frankly, that's the same reason we would sit and read the encyclopedia for hours. There were just little things
Right.
we wanted to take in.
You're
And we
just
needed to,
interested.
yeah, in bite-sized pieces. So
Yeah.
that's
I love it. I love it. And I really wanted to make the point that it's not just our children who are learning to read that shouldn't take the summer off, like Kelly was saying, or it'll be the slow slide into losing your skills. It's not just the kids who are learning to read, it's older students for
Yes.
the reasons that you two have just given. Um, in the summer, you can read what you're interested in, and you can read a little bit of this to quench your thirst for answering a certain question. I know one of my daughters just loved to read, and she loved the summer because she could indulge her imagination. She saw the world through books. So she read books that were set in faraway lands, in distant times, and it taught her. It gave her a great moral imagination because she solved lots of dilemmas that she would never personally be faced with, because they happened far away or long ago, but it built in her a character of resiliency. What would I do in that same situation? Or how did that work for that character? And so she got to know who she could be or who she might be by exploring the world through books. And for me, that's what I did. I lived 1,000 lifetimes before I graduated from high school because of all the books that I read. And the little things that you pick up become part of who you are. Um, give your children the freedom to explore the world with books. And I'm not saying don't steer them toward good things to read, because of course you want to have good things input, but let there be like Delisa's mom and let them read decorating books or makeup books or how to fix the lawnmower books, even if you don't have a lawnmower, whatever that child is interested in. And you know what, they may not be interested in it for more than a week at a time, but that's okay. um, all right, I want us to spend. I actually thought about setting a timer, but I'm not going to do it because that just is too schoolish. But we're going to take 60 seconds and brainstorm. I want you to brainstorm. How can moms and dads make reading an active experience this summer? Okay, so you just call out ways to make reading active. Go.
For foundation, I'll start. I'm waiting for this question. For foundations families, I would say this: revisit the past cycle of memory work and
Oh,
take note if there was anything that your child was like wanting to know more about. What did they wonder about? Make a
mm-hmm,
list of those topics. And if you
mm-hmm.
do have a child that's interested in nonfiction, that might be a great jumping off place because you're tying some of that reading to things that they've already experienced during
Yep.
that previous cycle. And I would also say this: one of the fun ways that I encourage as a challenge director for my challenge students to prepare for the upcoming year is I make a bingo board. And there's something about a bingo board that just makes them want to prepare because it's a lot more fun to cross things off a bingo board than it is to cross them off a list. And so there are lots of bingo templates online. Find a bingo template
Yeah.
and then think about all the different types of things that you could read together as a family and just start filling in the boxes.
Yeah.
And
That's
together,
really good.
yeah, have a book bingo summer where you just mark things off as you experience them together. And it can be a lot of fun because you're working together to achieve a common goal.
I love it that you said lots of different kinds of things. So like if I was making a bingo board, I would put a song. We're going to read song lyrics. We're going to read some poems. We're going to read a political speech, or maybe one of the farewell addresses or the inauguration speeches of a president. But also, we're going to find a manual. We're going to look for one of our manuals, and we're going to read through the how to and find words that you don't know. I also love the active reading that you can do when you, like Kelly was saying, read a cookbook and make something from that. Or, we used to say, okay, we're going to go to the library and you find a title that starts with, and I would give both of the girls a letter. And it doesn't matter what it is, and we're going to read it. We're going to see what that book is and is there a game we can play from that? Is there something we could draw for that? Or is it just really a bummer? You picked a book that we all hated. We can rally around that was a bad book. We'll never read it again. Just things that bring your family together that you can read together. Delise, what are some good active reading ideas?
Well, I think I've mentioned on the show before, we always had books that were in the category of things to make and do. So that
Oh,
was really
yeah.
fun. Back in the
Yep.
day, when they used to bring the
Yes.
encyclopedia to your doorstep, you had
Oh,
this
my word. Yes.
encyclopedia collection. However, that's not a thing anymore. So
I
you have to collect the
know.
books. But that's fun because in those books, you'll find things like arts and crafts or science, and you can go deeper.
Yes.
Let's say your kid picks out paper airplanes. They're obsessed with
Right.
paper airplanes. All they want to do is paper airplanes. Well, let's talk about flight. And then you could read books that go deeper down that, or let's talk about why a thing flies. Or thing
Mhm.
flies. Let's go through the science
Mhm.
brain, not just the historical brain. Or another thing that you could definitely do would be the cooking, but you could also
Uh-huh.
build something, build something large,
Yes.
make a family project
Yes.
out of something. See if you can recreate a scene from one of the books and leave it up.
Ooh.
We used to take those big refrigerator boxes. A lot of the hardware stores will give you
Yes.
those leftover
Did you make
boxes.
a playhouse out of
Yeah,
it?
make a playhouse, make
Mhm.
one of those worlds that you've always wanted to
Yes.
go to. Okay, well, let's let's see if we can make it with our own materials or things we can reference. Then there's also just painting. I mean, I know a lot of kids just like to illustrate what they're
Yeah.
seeing in their mind, and that can
Yep.
be really helpful for you to know, okay, this is how this child is interpreting this story. So letting them all draw it out is a really beautiful opportunity as well. I know some girls like to sew, and that's another really fun thing, especially if you're in
Yes.
different period pieces. You
Yep.
can make something that looks like it came from that era.
Mhm.
And this is the last one. I
Mhm.
have so many ideas, but the last one I'll share for today is also exploring different points in time. So, a
Oh,
children's
that's
book
good.
that was written in the 20s. I always like to look at the
Right.
copyright date. It's very different
Yes.
than a children's book that was written in
Yep.
the 80s. And if for an older child, that might sound like, okay, this is cool for a younger child, but for an older child, they may be able to pick up on some of those narratives and some of the
Yes.
themes or what was going on in the world at that time and why were they
Or
emphasizing things the way they were.
yes, or even what was expected of children. Like,
Uh-huh.
I have looked in old books and think, wow, that that would never have been the job of an 8-year-old today.
Exactly.
But in the 20s it was, or in the 40s it was this way, or in the 60s, this is what they were expected to do. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
really
It's
interesting,
fun, and it's a
Delise.
good art study too, like, if you wanted to
Mm-hmm.
the materials, if it's a picture book, what
Mm-hmm.
was available to them and why were they using it that way, or who were they inspired by? I mean, I could go on and on, but there are lots of
I
ways.
know. Well, you know what? One thing that we could take from this, all of us can take from this, is that get interested in
Mhm.
these books and in these stories yourself. The
Mhm.
questions that you have, you can absolutely share that wonder with your children when you ask questions about what you're reading, or when you want to do something with what you are reading together. It gives them the idea that, oh, we don't have to just sit here and read the story. We could then act out the story. I had one daughter who loved who wanted to act out a story. She actually wanted, in all fairness, she wanted to write a story and then have all her friends act out the story. And so we had to explore the fact that not everybody would know the story. This is not a story everybody knows, and everybody does not necessarily want you to tell them what they have to do. She was young enough that she just needed to work on that. So what we did was we picked a really familiar story. We took the story of the little red hen and we adapted it, because she said, well, none of my friends will want to be a chicken. And so we adapted it. And so it was the brave little princess. And I said, okay, but the lines have to be predictable so that we don't have a lot of time to practice. This is the summer. We're not going, the costumes have to be easy. So we scripted, because of who was going to be involved. We scripted. So we had the brave little princess, we had the littlest princess, we had the pretty, pretty princess, we had the court guard, and we had the court jester. And it was kind of like, who will help me bake this cake
Mm.
instead of who will help me plant this corn. But anyway, you can find what your child loves,
Mhm.
what they are motivated to spend their time on, and show them how reading a book together can make what they want to do possible, can give them a framework for exploring something that they are eager to pursue. Reading can be active. And that's what we wanted to leave you guys with today. Summer reading, yes, it's a thing. It's still a thing. It's a thing again. But active reading, maybe that could be your new summer fun this year.
Mhm.
Kelly and Delise, thank you so much. I appreciate it. What's your parting word? What's your parting salvo for this podcast
Mhm.
for families who want to pursue active reading?
Oh, I think mine would be, parents, challenge yourself to be a cultivator of curiosity this summer.
Oh, I
And
like that.
if you are cultivating curiosity, then you're going to have a beautiful garden for the imagination for your child to play in.
That's lovely, Kelly. Good. Delise.
Beautifully said. I think I would encourage parents to do this for themselves as well, kind of like putting your
Mhm.
Mhm.
own oxygen mask
Good.
on. Make sure that you're reading something that makes you curious. Do you need a highlighter when you're reading that book?
Mm-hmm.
If not, maybe find something more challenging sometimes. Encourage yourself to dive deeper, because I think once you remember what it's like to learn and to do things for the first time, it makes you a much more empathetic teacher.
Yeah.
And so staying in that position of cultivating your own curiosity will really help you to recognize those sparks in your kids, so that you can create that culture in your family.
That's really good. That's really good. We are trying to cultivate a family culture of learning, and doing it all together makes that fun. All right, families, as you're looking forward to next year already, well, you may be planning. The Math Map series by Classical Conversations offers a unique Christ centered approach to mathematics. It's time to think about teaching math this year. And this is something great for you guys to consider. It emphasizes the language of math in the natural learning environment. This is really good. The Math Map provides scaffolded math instruction across multiple levels. So all of your children are going to be exploring the same concept, but at their level. So right now we have digits, we have integers, fractions. These are designed for different age groups, but every level, this is the best part, every level builds on your previous one. So it helps students progressively master these concepts, from basic digits, and this is like 5-year-olds up, to integers to fractions. So this curriculum is great. It is an entire family schoolhouse approach. And the booklets will allow your children to work on concepts at their level while you, as the parent, are teaching everybody together. So discover how your family can celebrate God's design for mathematics. You can visit classicalconversations.com, the math map, today and find out more about it. Okay. So you guys go and actively read this summer, and maybe drop us a line and let us know, what are you reading and how is it going? What are you doing to be active with your reading? We would love to hear from you. So go forth and read and let us know. All right. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.